Snow drifted softly the day the women arrived, carried by winds that whispered over the jagged peaks and down into the valley where Einar had built his quiet refuge. The sky was pale, a dim silver sheet stretched above endless stretches of untouched snow and pine. The women stepped forward hesitantly, each foot sinking into powder that muffled their approach. Their breaths rose in trembling white clouds as they looked upon the timber hall, unsure of what awaited them within its walls. They had prepared themselves for cold commands, for sharp eyes judging their worth, for a life where their voices would be lost beneath the roar of authority. Einar stood at the doorway, his figure sturdy but softened by time, his cloak heavy with fur, and his gaze steady and impossibly calm. He did not shout for them to hurry. He did not assess their strength or appearance. Instead, he simply nodded, acknowledging their exhaustion, and moved aside to allow them warmth. Inside, the hall was lit by crackling firelight, shadows dancing over wooden beams and the carved symbols of old gods. The air smelled of pine and baked bread, and something sweeter they had not tasted in many winters, honey warmed in a clay dish. Snow melted from their cloaks as they entered, and for a moment, they simply stood in silence, overwhelmed. Spring came late to the frontier land, as if winter itself struggled to let go of the valley that had once been defined by hardship and silence. But when warmth finally arrived, it carried with it a quiet sense of rebirth, a stirring that touched earth, water, and every heart that called the valley home. The snow receded, revealing soil that had patiently waited beneath the ice, and with it rose the proof of what kindness could cultivate, rows of young shoots Astrid had planted with her determined hands, herbs that Freya tended with care, and the soft footpaths Sigrid had worn from stable to field, where horses now grazed peacefully. People from neighboring settlements began to speak of the place, though many did not believe the stories at first. The frontier had always been a place of whispers, warnings wrapped in fear, tales carried by traveling traders of women sent away, hidden lives, and harsh fates. Yet now messengers returned with a different kind of story, one that unsettled the old assumptions. They spoke of a hall that did not echo with the clash of iron or the roar of drunken warriors, but instead with gentle conversation, shared meals, children's laughter, and the soft lullabies sung by women who had found peace. Some scoffed at such claims. Others, quietly yearning for such peace themselves, listened a little more closely. Einar watched the valley come alive not with pride in himself, but with awe at what peaceful intentions had nurtured. Years ago he had walked away from a life of conquest, from the sharp bite of steel and the emptiness that followed victory after victory. He had not known whether redemption existed for a man who once lived by the sword. But now, as he walked between the planted rows, passing Astrid who wiped soil from her brow and grinned at a new sprout, he felt something settle in his chest, not triumph, but deep contentment. There was power here too, but a different kind, one forged through growth rather than force. Freya's healing hut sat near the river, its roof covered in drying herbs and garlands of wildflowers gifted by children she had nursed through winter's fevers and spring coughs. Once she had feared her skills would fade in a place where her past was unknown, but instead the valley offered her something unexpected, not just patients to tend, but students eager to learn. When neighboring families began bringing their sick or injured, they arrived with anxious hearts, expecting judgment or rejection. Instead Freya greeted them with gentle hands and warm broth, asking only that they offer kindness in return someday, somewhere. The valley developed a reputation not of fear, but of healing. Sigrid grew alongside the animals she cared for. The once timid young woman whose voice trembled with every word now laughed freely, chasing foals through the fields and braiding flowers into their manes. When travelers arrived, wary and uncertain, she guided them to rest, her voice steady and welcoming. Horses born under her care became sought after across the region, not for battle, but for work and companionship, known for their calm nature, a reflection of the peace in which they had been raised. She no longer moved through the world like someone expecting harm. She carried herself like someone who knew she belonged. As the seasons turned, more people sought out the valley. Some came hoping to trade, others hoping to learn, and a few hoping to challenge the idea that such a place could exist. Einar welcomed all with the same quiet fairness. The valley held strength, not the brittle strength of domination, but the steady strength of harmony. Those who arrived expecting weakness found themselves humbled by a community built not on fear, but shared purpose. And those who arrived wounded by their past found, often to their own surprise, a place to rest. With time, the valley earned a new name. Once called Frozen Hollow, a place whispered about in dread, it became known as Hjartadalir, the Valley of Hearts. The name spread slowly, at first spoken only by those who had seen the peace firsthand. Eventually it traveled far beyond the fjords, carried by traders who felt compelled to share the unusual truth. There existed a northern valley where women found not oppression but opportunity, where children orphaned by raids found arms to hold them, where a warrior laid down his axe not out of defeat, but out of hope. Long after Einar's hair turned silver and his shoulders stooped with age, he would often sit by the river, watching the women he once welcomed as strangers now leading a thriving community. Freya's apprentices carried baskets of herbs. Astrid debated crop plans with a growing council of settlers. Sigrid rode across the pastures with a child perched before her, teaching the next generation gentle strength. Einar never claimed credit, he believed the valley healed him just as much as it healed them. The world beyond the frontier continued to roar and clash, but Hjartadalir remained a quiet testament to the fact that even in a harsh age, kindness had the power to carve out sanctuary. Years later, skalds would tell tales of it in mead halls and by winter fires, sometimes doubted, sometimes believed. But the valley did not need to defend its truth. It existed, living proof that fate could be rewritten not by force, but by compassion, and that the truest strength sometimes lay in laying down one's weapons and choosing to build instead of destroy. Their unspoken fate had never been despair. In the end, it was freedom, hard-earned, quietly tended, and shared generously with all who came seeking it.